Pray with me. Now, Lord God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Once upon a time, there was a land with no king. Or rather, they did have a king. It was that their God was their king. And their God had set up for them a system of judges, people of character and strength, who led them. But the people began to notice that all the other cool countries around them had a king. And so they went to God and they said, "We would like to have a king." And God said, "This is a terrible idea. If I give you a king, the king is going to take all of your land. He is going to take all of your girls for his bed and all of his boys for your soldiers. And you will have nothing left because the king will take it all. Have I not set you up with judges? Have I not been your protector? Am I not a good enough king for you?" And the people whined, "But everyone else gets a king. Why can't we have one?" And so the Lord gave in. And he sent his prophet Eli, and he found a young man, a tall, good-looking young man. His name was Saul, and he was from the least of the tribes, from the tribe of Benjamin. And the Lord sent Eli and said, "Anoint this man Saul, and Saul shall become your king." And so Eli did so, and Saul became the king of the people of Israel. And for a while, he was a great king. He led them into battle. He won a few battles. He did pretty good for a while. But Saul forgot that God was really the one in charge. Saul forgot to listen to the voice of God, and pretty soon Saul became corrupt in the ways that God had predicted. And so the Lord went to another prophet, Samuel, and he said, "Samuel, this is not going well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to send you to Jesse, and you're going to anoint one of his sons. I'm going to show you. You're going to anoint him king." And Samuel said, "This is a terrible idea. Saul is going to cut my heart out and eat it for lunch." And God said, "No, don't worry. Just tell him you're going to come do a sacrifice. You come to buy a cow. You're going to go buy a cow, and meanwhile, I'm going to show you who's going to be the next king." So Samuel did as he was instructed. And he went to the house of Jesse, and he had Jesse bring before him all his sons. And he looked at them. They were good. They were strong, good looking, but they were not the one. And so Samuel said, "Do you have any more of these guys?" And Jesse said, "Well, I've got my youngest son. He's the nerd that's out on the fields taking care of the sheep. You can't mean him." And to his credit, Samuel said, "Yeah, just get him." So he sends for David. David, the youngest son, comes running. And David is a young boy. He is tall and gangly, good-looking, described as good-looking, pretty much smelling of sheep. Comes into the room, and Samuel says, "That's him. That's the one." So he anoints David as king. Remember that there is a sitting king with an army, and David has now been anointed as king. So a little time passes, and the people of Israel are attacked on all sides. As I have told you, they are wont to be. They are being attacked now by the Philistines. And the Philistines have a secret weapon. He is a giant of a man. He is 7 feet tall. He has muscles bulging out. He does that CrossFit thing, with the ropes. He's really bulky. And he comes in he's got his armor on, and he's got this great big voice. And the people of Israel are hiding from him because his name is Goliath. This giant's name is Goliath. And he comes in and he stomps on the ground and he says, "Who's out there who is willing to come fight me. I'll take any man. Send 1 man. Send 10 men. I'll take them all down. I'll eat their livers for my lunch, and I'll have their teeth as my necklace. Oh. And there are no takers from the Israelites. Jesse sends his son David to the front lines where his brothers are in the army. He sends them with resupply, some food, some things that they need. And David is just to go and take the supplies and come back. But David gets there and he hears Goliath. Ah! Who is out there who will fight me? And David looks around. And it looks like no one is coming forward to fight this giant. And David turns to his brothers and he says, now who is going to fight this guy? And they're like, do you want to do it? Because we're not going. And David's kind of like, I mean, I could. So David goes to see Saul. And he says to Saul, look, I'll fight this guy. I mean, I'm out in the fields all the time. There's lions, there's bears. I take them all down. He has kind of the arrogance of the young. He's like, I never die. So I'll do it. I will take on this giant. And Saul says, I mean, okay. So he says, put on my armor. And David tries. He puts on the armor, and you can picture it. You know, the visor's down over his face, and the greaves are up here around his arms, and he can't even move. And he takes it off, and he says, nope, this is not how you do it. I've got a slingshot. That's how I killed the lion. I'm good. I'll take him on my own terms, and God will be with me. So he goes to the river and he finds 5 smooth stones. And he picks them up and he puts them in his pocket. And then he goes out to the field of battle where Goliath is just kind of pacing back and forth. Oh, I'm ready for battle. Where's my opponent? Send me anybody. I'll eat him. And David steps onto the field. And at first Goliath does not notice him because he's little. And then he sees him and all he can do is laugh. He's like, this is what you're sending me? You sent me a peanut, which I will put on my bread. You have sent me my lunch. And David says, you are standing against the people of God, and God is with me, and my dear friend, you are going down. And Goliath thinks this is hilarious. Oh, come on, boy, come on. And so Goliath takes his stance. He gets his sword ready. He's ready, and he starts moving towards this kid. And the kid gets the stone, and he puts it in his slingshot. Thunk. And the stone lands right in the middle of the forehead of Goliath, burying itself in his forehead. And as giants are wont to do, Goliath, boom, falls flat on his face. And David cuts his head off. And he stands and he says, this is the victory that was given to me by God. And the people of Israel, the soldiers, are heartened by this. And they come out of their hiding places and they rush over the field and they hit the Philistines with everything they've got. And they chase the Philistines away and defeat them soundly. Now this is a story you know very well. You've heard it before, and not just in this context, right? You recognize it because you've been told this story since you were very small. And if you've lived in the West all your life, you've heard it over and over and over. You may know many stories of the one true king, the hero king, who defeats the enemies of the people and takes over from the ineffective, faithless, or even evil king. You may know many stories of a little guy who fights the big guy. You've seen It's a Wonderful Life, have you not? You know that movie, right? And you've got the little housing and loan up against the big banks, and you've got George Bailey up against the mean old Mr. Potter. You know the stories about the youngest son rising up over the older brothers. In biblical stories, this is the rule rather than the exception. You've seen the wise man who recognizes the hero and empowers him to act. You know about the hero's journey and his tragic flaw. You know where this story is going and how it will end. You know more about archetypes, having read Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung at some point, some of you. And for those of you who may not be as familiar with the terms around archetypal characters and stories, let me go over them briefly. An archetype is a character or a story which appears repeatedly throughout world literature. All cultures have hero stories, stories of the hero's journey, encounters with the supernatural, battles against great odds, battles for the protection of people writing the story. Some of the recurring characters are the orphan, Tom Sawyer, Harry Potter. Some of them are the sage, Merlin the magician, Gandalf the Grey, Dumbledore. Or you can have the rebel, like Huck Finn, or currently my favorite in the superhero category is Jessica Jones, always breaking the rules, in black over on the side. Any one of a million detective stories you can point to for the rebel. American detectives are always in trouble, are they not? They are always breaking the rules. They are always about to be fired or killed or both. And that's how we like them. That's our favorite one, the rebel. You might have the caregiver, like Sally Field's character in Steel Magnolias, or the explorer, like Alice in Alice in Wonderland, or Max in Where the Wild Things Are. And then there is the hero. The hero comes not just with character traits, including courage and strength and ultimately a flaw that is his downfall or her downfall, but also with a plot line, the journey. Carl Jung saw the hero archetype as a representation of the unconscious mind. All of us, Jung said, are the heroes of our own story. We have to fight our own dragons, conquer our own giants, and in doing so, become fully human. We are all on the hero's journey, facing what Jung called the dark ground of ourselves, and coming through triumphant on the other side. And so the people of Israel have David. Moses was the conduit through which they were freed from captivity, but it was David who brought them glory. David who made them a true country. I may have mentioned to you that until 1948, the people of Israel had rule over themselves for a sum total of 100 years between antiquity and the modern era. Those years during the reign of David and of his sons. Glory days. And it's interesting to note the parallels between the stories of David's and say, the story of King Arthur of Britain. David is not an orphan, but he is a youngest son. Arthur is an orphan who faces a challenge against great odds as a youth. David and Arthur both unite their people with the help of a wise man, Samuel in the case of David, Merlin the magician in the case of Arthur. They both marry a woman who is loved by another man, and they both have a son who betrays them and is subsequently killed in battle. Most significantly, they are both regarded as the once and future king. It is no accident that Jesus is born in the city of David, nor is it coincidence that he traces his bloodline through carefully recorded genealogies directly back to David. He is David returned, the once and future king. And while there's evidence to suggest that the real David did rule over the golden age of Israel, what is more important is that David is the hero and on the hero's journey. It is more important because then David represents the journey we each are on. We are David facing Goliath. We are David anointed in our calling. We are David ruling over our own lives with the help of God. What does that mean to say that we are David? What does it mean to be on the hero's journey? Why even point it out? I think for me it is more important than ever for us to feel some power over our own lives. So much of living life, no matter what time period you live in, is being subject to the whims of the time. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, we were on an almost constant threat of nuclear war. We understood ourselves to be, at any moment, at the whim of the Soviet government, whose motives were unpredictable. I was not alive during the Bay of Pigs event, but I lived a life under its threat my entire childhood. I was alive through the Vietnam War and remember the images on television, the silver bands people wore for the POWs, the confusion of people beginning to question the government and wonder if it actually did have our best interests at heart. Our sense of being in control of our lives has only diminished from my perspective. I see a culture of learned helplessness. Racism, for example, seems so entrenched. What can I possibly do about it? How can I fight a good old boy network or corporate power in politics or global climate change? How on earth do I have control over any of these things that affect my life? The best I can do is just hunker down and try to live the best I can and hope that these enormous powers do not kill me while I am living. And although I believe God understands our sense of powerlessness, our actual powerlessness against the forces at work around us in this world, I also see in this miraculous text the secret code to solving our problems, the instruction manual for becoming empowered over our own lives. And it is this: we are the heroes of our own journeys. We have the power of God standing with us every time we confront a Goliath, every time we step onto whatever battlefield we have chosen. The story of David is not the story of some extraordinary individual. He's not a superhero. He's described as young, good-looking, and brave. And as we'll see as the story proceeds, he is also greedy, short-sighted, and often blinded by, you can call it love or you can call it lust, but it acts on him. So in other words, he's a human being. Just a regular old human managing the best he can with the tools he has. Sometimes he pulls off extraordinary victories, and sometimes he is plunged into the depths of his own failure. David's successes, though, are always tied to his sense of the presence of God. When he puts God aside, he fails. When he listens to God, he succeeds. This element is the only true distinction between the Greek and Roman heroes we learned about in the 8th grade and the heroes of the Bible. To the Greeks and Romans, gods were fickle beings, just as likely to harm you for their own amusement as to help you if you needed it. Biblical heroes have a different God, a steadfast, faithful, unchanging God, who breathed the very breath of life into them and who loves them like a mother, like a father. Biblical heroes only win if they are working hand in hand with God. And if they are working with God, nothing defeats them. They conquer cities, they break down walls, they defeat armies against massive odds. They defeat giants and plagues and famine and exile and oppression. And in the Easter story, we find that the one whose eye is fixed on God defeats even death. I know that I've been ragging quite a bit lately on the story of John Henry, who died with a hammer in his hand. The reading that I have been giving you of the story has to do with the work ethic and how it works on us. But that's not the only possible reading of that story, maybe not even the best reading. The story of John Henry is also a David and Goliath story. One man from a culture of oppression being oppressed again by corporate greed. One man standing up to the giant of the steam engine. One man winning on behalf of all the others. It is also the Jesus story, the sacrifice story, one for the many, one man dying for the lives of the others. This morning, I was up on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and incidentally, I want to thank you for that. I didn't in my wildest dreams ever think that I would be able to sit on the Blue Ridge Parkway before I came to church. I sat next to a field full of black and blue butterflies, flying happily from flower to flower. There must have been 100 of them. And I thought about how those butterflies were blissfully ignorant of the giants all around them. They have no Doppler radar to tell them about the heat coming or the storms or ridiculous tornadoes that will plague their lives. They know nothing of pesticides or GMOs or the effect of plastics on the planet. They don't worry about who will be on the Supreme Court or whether their government will do something new, terrible in their name. We do. We are constantly confronted with giants, both personal and communal. And in order not to give in to our sense of powerlessness over those giants, we need to know ourselves, to know our gifts, to know our calling. We need to feel empowered by the presence of God, of all the universe working in us and through us. At least one of the reasons that the story of John Henry lasts in our culture is that he is a hero who knows when his moment to act has come. The story of David is our story. We are the kings, each of us, of our own story. And although we don't always know what form our Goliath will take, we do know that we will be called upon to fight. We have each been anointed with purpose, anointed with a calling. Each of us has a reason we are here on this earth, and good work to do while we are here. There is something important to notice about David in this story. There were many soldiers around when Goliath issued his challenge, but none of them saw themselves as capable of facing him. David saw the challenge. He was awake to what was happening and to his own skills. When the people saw what he could do, they followed him. And when Saul failed them as a king, they told David, "You are bone of our bone. We want you to be our shepherd." It's not that everyone should fight the same fight. Not every Goliath is your Goliath. Our job is to be awake, to be watchful, to know when it is our turn to step forward and be the hero. The scale may change, but the challenge is always the same. If you come to a moment when your people are cornered, when their backs are against the wall, when you see what is happening and you know that you have the skills to make things right, in that moment, don't look around for the hero. It is you. You are the hero. If you seek the power of God, in that moment, God will be with you, no matter how big the giant you face. Amen.